This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. All right, so over the weekend, we got news that Nick Chubb has retired. And this is like crazy because this is the first time I think a prominent member of the Cleveland Browns has had their entire career beginning to end happen while this channel has existed. So you can actually look up what people were thinking about Nick Chubb, or at least on this channel, from the beginning. Nick Chubb is one of the most beloved players in Cleveland Browns history. He's certainly one of the most beloved players from recent Cleveland Browns history. And I just wanted to talk about why Nick Chubb is important, why his career was important, and why Browns fans will always cape for Nick Chubb whenever the opportunity comes to do so. So that's what I want to spend my time talking about today. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to continue, but first I got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 sports pick app. The app is really easy to use for player picks. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. That's it. Rather just pick teams, PrizePicks has that now too. Just pick the winner, spread, or total in any game or fight. PrizePicks is available in most states, including California, Texas, and Florida. Plus, you can even follow me on the app at Quen_C. Tell my picks, one click, and follow your friends too. Best of all, play your first $5 and get $150 in lineups if you win. Just use the promo code HMA when you sign up. That's right. PrizePicks just switched up their offer, so there's no better time to join. Lock in and win with that first lineup. That's code HMA at sign up to get $150 in bonus lineups if you win with your first $5 or up lineup. Here's the thing that I don't think people really understand about Nick Chubb, right? Even to this day. And this is why I've personally, whenever I've gotten the chance to, have pounded the table to try to get the Browns to bring back Nick Chubb before he retired. Now, obviously, Nick Chubb is retired now. He's going to come back and probably sign a one-day contract with the Cleveland Browns and retire as a Cleveland Brown, as he should, as he never should have been out the grasp of this organization. That's going to be a nice and fun moment for the fans. But really, I don't think people get just how instrumental Nick Chubb is to everything that the Browns have built and are trying to build going forward, right? If you've been a lifelong Browns fan, you would know that there was a period of time here in Cleveland where the idea of making a playoff game was absurd, right? I know people like to act like whatever we're going through right now is the worst version of the Browns that we're living through. You know, the woe is me, feel bad for me, Browns fan stuff, right? That people like to do. Oh, this is the worst time to be a Browns fan, all this stuff. But I vividly remember what it was like when this team went through, what was it, almost a 15-year stretch of not even coming close to qualifying for the playoffs, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Where the Browns are today, it's not where we want to be, and it's not good, right? But the Browns have made the playoffs 2 times in the last 5 years. If you would have told me that the Browns could make the playoffs 2 times within a 5-year period in like 2012, I would have been thrilled to hear that the Browns would be capable of such success, right? For a lot of Browns fans my age, Nick Chubb represents and is the face of the most successful period for the Cleveland Browns post-expansion, right? 2 11-win seasons while Nick Chubb was here. Unfortunately for Nick Chubb, both of those 11-win seasons, I think he was injured for a significant chunk of the season. 2020, he did come back for the end of. In 2024, well, not 2023, he got injured, obviously, at the beginning because of a hit from Minkah Fitzpatrick. But what Nick Chubb represents is what we hope to become the standard of the Cleveland Browns going forward, right? The kind of player that the Cleveland Browns focus on, the kind of man that the Cleveland Browns look for. Like when you hear the Browns talk about a orange dot player, right? When they talk about an orange dot player, this is something that they gave Spencer Fano. I believe Dylan Sampson in 2025's class was somebody that they also gave the orange sticker to. When they're talking about somebody with the orange sticker, that is their marker for somebody in the pre-draft who has demonstrated extremely high character, right? Like if they go through their coach interviews, they go through the interviews with you, the background search, and they hear nothing but positive things, they will give that prospect a orange sticker. Everything that the Browns are looking for when it comes to deeming somebody a orange sticker player is based off of the example that Nick Chubb set, right? So when you hear the Browns talk about how much they love Spencer Fano and they think Spencer Fano's a blue check guy in the locker room, part of that DNA that makes Spencer Fano an orange dot guy for them, somebody they've tagged to be a future leader of this football team, is there's some Nick Chubb in that DNA, right? No matter what success the Browns have going forward, who's having that success, Nick Chubb is going to have his fingerprints on that. He's put his DNA in the entirety of the franchise, the Cleveland Browns, right? For a lot of people, Nick Chubb is the quintessential Cleveland Brown, right? Somebody who comes in, works hard, gets the job done, doesn't complain, doesn't whine, does what's needed to, and doesn't put it in your face that he's that good all the time too, right? Like Nick Chubb was humble. That is the quintessential Cleveland Brown. No, he didn't reach the heights, unfortunately, that some of his peers were able to reach. But don't forget, when Nick Chubb was in his prime, he was up there, arguably better at that period than Saquon Barkley. He was up there with Christian McCaffrey. He was up there with Derrick Henry. For a couple of years, the conversation wasn't even about Saquon or Christian McCaffrey. It was just, who's the best running back, Derrick Henry or Nick Chubb? That is the level of play that Nick Chubb was able to reach. Averaged 5 yards a carry throughout his career, and he got a ton of carries, right? I think the Browns were top 3 in rushing attempts for like 3 seasons while Nick Chubb was here as a running back. And that shows you that ability to keep that 5 yards a carry average. One, not only was he explosive, but that shows you how rarely he was ever taken down behind the line of scrimmage. In a way, Nick Chubb's existence is unfair for all the other running backs that will come after him, because we're going to put those guys not be able to view them as their own, but like we're going to view Quincy Judkins. It's like, okay, but Nick Chubb's going to be at the top of the mind when we're talking about Quincy, because that's the example, right? That's the guy. When people talk about playing like a Brown, when the Browns talk about guys that they want to play like a Cleveland Brown, Nick Chubb is that guy, right? Nick Chubb is the example. You've never heard anything about Nick Chubb that wasn't positive about him being a teammate. Nick Chubb wasn't out here holding up camp. Nick Chubb wasn't out here selling out his teammates. Nick Chubb wasn't getting in trouble for driving his car too fast in the offseason. All it seemed like Nick Chubb ever did throughout his career is work hard and show up. It's unfortunate that Nick Chubb's career was cut short. I think that is one of the modern tragedies of not just Cleveland Browns history, but I think it did a disservice to football because Nick Chubb was one of the most exciting players to watch in football. I'm looking at a clip of the Philadelphia Eagles play right now, and I'm just reminded of that one run where Nick Chubb threw a defensive end. Y'all remember that when he threw an entire defensive end? I mean, just the spectacular highlights. It's hard to imagine just how good Nick Chubb was, given the fact that the injury made the fall off so steep for him. But he was one of the best players in the NFL. There are going to be questions about whether Nick Chubb's ever going to be in the Hall of Fame, right? And Hall of Fame's a tough conversation to have for a running back because every 20 years, the Hall of Fame cycles out positions that they think are worthy of being in the Hall of Fame, right? Because of how the game's played, it just becomes hard to get into the Hall of Fame at certain positions. Rex Fortune says Chubb will be in every fan's top 3. One of the greatest to watch in Chubb Hunt era will be nostalgic. Absolutely. Absolutely. If Chubb's not in your top 3, then your top 3 is trash, right? Like your top 3 has to have, especially in the modern era, right? Like it's Miles, Chubb, and then you could maybe put Denzel Ward in there. You know what I mean? Like think about that too. Like how recent all of those guys in the top 3 are to the Cleveland Browns. It just tells you it was a bad period here to be a Browns fan. Like in the 2010s. It was rough. But anyways, let me get back to Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's the example. Oh, yeah. But the Hall of Fame's a hard conversation to have, right? Because every few years, the NFL cycles in positions that are important, not important. Running back's one of those positions where it has not been centered enough to where it's going to be easy for guys to make the Hall of Fame. If we're looking at guys who are no doubt Hall of Famers that are playing right now at running back, I know people are going to debate this, but really it's Adrian Peterson, he's not active anymore, but he's definitely going to make the Hall of Fame when he's eligible. Derrick Henry's definitely going to make the Hall of Fame when he's eligible. Everybody else is a little bit more questionable. Maybe Christian McCaffrey, probably Saquon Barkley if he has another big year. But outside of that, it's going to be really hard to make the Hall of Fame as a running back because the bar is just set at a place to where it's hard to grab, right? I know people make the argument for Frank Gore, all these other running backs, Fred Taylor, that haven't made it. But there's a lot of running backs that were really, really good that have not been in the Hall of Fame. Right. So I don't know if the Hall of Fame is going to be a conversation that's going to be appropriate and flattering for Nick Chubb, given that he did have the injury and his career was kind of short. But I know that he's a no-brainer, like Ring of Fame guy for the Cleveland Browns, you know? And I think that he is undoubtedly a true legend of the Cleveland Browns and should be treated like royalty by this organization, because he showed loyalty to them even when it was time for them to go their separate ways. Nick Chubb never defamed the organization, right? We see guys like Wyatt Teller, they leave here and they just nonstop talk junk about the organization that revitalized his career, right? You know, we see it all the time. These guys that leave Cleveland and then now they got all kind of things to say. Whenever they talked to Nick Chubb about Cleveland, he would smile. Even when he wasn't here, even when he was in Houston, he would get a big smile on his face and talk about how much he missed it here. I mean, his whole time in Houston was defined by him missing the Cleveland Browns. He missed the Browns every minute he was away from here. And I think part of the reason he wants to retire is he just doesn't want to play another season out in Cleveland. I think if the Browns said, hey, we going to sign you, he would play. But part of the reason he's retiring is like, hey, man, Cleveland's home. He'd rather just be home, right? Home in Georgia, home in Cleveland. That's where Nick Chubb and his career belong. I wish Nick Chubb's career was much longer. I wish Nick Chubb was able to extend his prime the extra 2 or 3 years that it needed so that we can make the argument for him being a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's a lot of things I wish happened with Nick Chubb. And Nick Chubb is a reminder that we don't always get what we deserve. Because if anybody did deserve it, it's Nick Chubb, right? But unfortunately, we get the life that we get. We get the opportunities that we get. We get the breaks and the bad luck that we get. And our job is not to wish or be upset or be bitter about that. Our job is just to do the best that we can with what we can get. And for what Nick Chubb was dealt for his career, the devastating knee injury in college that should have ended his career. And then he had another devastating knee injury that should have ended his career on the spot. But he came back. And I think that's the definition of Nick Chubb. I think that's what we should remember Nick Chubb's career as. Resilient. Being able to dig himself out of circumstance and never, ever wanting to center himself despite the fact that he was out there achieving greatness, right? Nick Chubb never made it about himself. Nick Chubb I don't remember Nick Chubb ever uttering the word me. Y'all can tell me, do you remember Nick Chubb ever saying the word me? I don't ever remember that, right? Like, that's where Nick Chubb and his legacy belongs with this team. Not just the player that he was, but the example that he set in that locker room for what a Cleveland Brown should be and for what the Browns are looking for in a Cleveland Brown. So when you see Spencer Fano and the organization is talking about how much they love him and they love his personality, there's Nick Chubb DNA in that. When Jared Verse is out there and being a leader and they're talking about how much they value that, there's some Nick Chubb in there, even though he does it in a very different way than Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is not as vocal as Jared Verse. Jared Verse like to talk, right? Nick Chubb, that's not his style. But the loyalty, right, that Jared Verse has, how much his teammates love him, that's something that Nick Chubb had that they saw and said, hey, we want that in the guys in our locker room, right? It might come out in different ways, but in my lifetime, I've never seen a better running back wear the Cleveland Browns jersey. Yeah, I've never seen one better. And maybe I'll never see somebody better than Nick Chubb wear this jersey. Maybe we'll get people who are close. Maybe Quincy will eclipse him. But Nick Chubb is the greatest running back I've ever seen in a Cleveland Browns jersey in my lifetime. And I just wanted to spend some time here to talk about his career, to give Nick Chubb his flowers, because I have had the pleasure of covering his entire career from the beginning in 2018 to the end. And it was an honor to cover and talk about Nick Chubb. I never, ever had to say anything bad about Nick Chubb. And I think that's the marker of a true professional and somebody who is a bona fide legend in the city of Cleveland.